The grand chamber of the Galactic Senate floated in the darkness of space, a massive structure of crystal and metal that gleamed like a jewel among the stars. Inside, representatives from 40 different species sat in their designated sections, their forms as varied as the worlds they came from. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some stood on 2 legs, others on 6 or none at all. But they all shared one thing in common. They believed they were superior to the newest members of their council. Ambassador Dae-hyun stood at the central platform, his dark suit a stark contrast to the elaborate robes and biological displays of the other delegates. He had prepared for this moment for months, reviewing every detail of humanity's proposal. The holographic display behind him showed trade routes, economic projections, and resource distributions. It was a fair system, one that would benefit everyone equally. He believed in it completely. Honored members of the Senate, Dae-hyun began, his voice steady and clear. Humanity presents this proposal not for our benefit alone, but for the prosperity of all species in this council. The current trade system creates bottlenecks that limit growth. Our solution would increase efficiency by 32% across all major routes. He paused, expecting questions or at least acknowledgement. Instead, a strange sound began to ripple through the chamber. It took him a moment to recognize it. Laughter. They were laughing at him. The Vethrak representative, a large reptilian creature named Sulak, was the first to speak. His voice boomed through the translation systems. The humans think they understand galactic trade after only 50 years. How amusing. We have been trading among the stars for 10,000 years, young one. Perhaps you should observe for a few more centuries before presuming to teach us. More laughter followed. The insectoid Quillix delegate clicked her mandibles in what their species considered mockery. Do the children always believe they know better than their elders? It is charming in a way, like watching larvae trying to instruct the queen. Dae-hyun felt his jaw tighten, but he maintained his composure. Beside him, his assistant Hana shifted uncomfortably. She had warned him this might happen, but he had hoped the Senate would at least consider the proposal on its merits. Council Chair Thelos rose from his elevated position. He was ancient, even by the standards of his long-lived species. His skin had a translucent quality and his eyes held the weight of millennia. When he spoke, the chamber fell silent out of respect for his age and position. Ambassador Dae-hyun, Thelos said, his tone gentle but condescending. Humanity has contributed much to our community in your brief time here. Your enthusiasm is noted. Your idealism is refreshing. But you must understand that the systems we have in place were designed by civilizations far older and wiser than yours. They have been tested and refined over eons. He gestured around the chamber with one long, thin arm. We appreciate your effort, truly. But perhaps it would be better if humanity focused on learning from us, rather than attempting to restructure systems you do not yet fully comprehend. There is no shame in being young. Every species must start somewhere. You should be grateful for the opportunity to learn from your betters. The other delegates nodded in agreement. Some made sounds of approval in their various languages. The Draken representative, Yelena, at least had the courtesy to look somewhat uncomfortable, but she said nothing in humanity's defense. Dae-hyun looked down at his datapad, where months of research and careful planning were reduced to nothing more than an amusing distraction for the Senate. He thought about all the human scientists, economists, and diplomats who had worked on this proposal. He thought about the hope they had shared that this time would be different, that this time the Senate would see humanity as equals. I see, Dae-hyun said quietly. Thank you for your time, honored members. He gathered his materials and stepped down from the platform. The Senate had already moved on to the next item on their agenda before he reached the exit. As if humanity's proposal had never existed at all. In the corridor outside, Hana caught up with him. Ambassador, should we file a formal complaint? That was beyond disrespectful. It was, no, Dae-hyun interrupted, his voice calm but cold. We won't need to. Hana looked at him in confusion. What do you mean? Dae-hyun pulled out his personal communicator and typed a brief message. It was addressed to President Jiwoo on Earth, marked with the highest priority. The message contained only 3 words. They didn't listen. He hit send and looked back at the chamber doors. Through the transparent sections, he could see the delegates laughing and talking, completely unaware of what they had just set in motion. Come on, he said to Hana. We have a lot of work to do. We need to prepare for the journey home. When do we leave? Hana asked. Daehyun checked his communicator again. A response from Earth had already arrived. It was just as brief as his message had been. Soon, he said. Very soon, and Hana, make sure every human in Senate space knows to be ready. This time, when we leave, we won't be coming back. The Human Council chamber on Earth's orbital station was nothing like the Grand Senate Hall. It was simple, functional, and filled with people who were very angry. President Jiwoo sat at the head of the long table, her fingers pressed together, as she watched the recording of the Senate meeting for the third time. Each replay made her expression harder. Play it again, she said quietly. President, we've all seen it, Admiral Taeyang said. He was the head of the Human Defense Fleet, a tall man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. Watching it more times won't change what happened. No, but it will remind me why we're about to make this decision, Jiwoo replied. The recording played again. The laughter, the mockery, the casual dismissal of months of work. When Thalos called humanity children who should be grateful to learn, from their betters, several people around the table made sounds of disgust. Trade Minister Hyunwoo stood and activated his own display. Charts and graphs filled the air, glowing in red and orange. I've been reviewing our trade agreements with the Senate, he said. Really reviewing them, not just the summaries we were given. The results are worse than we thought. He pointed to the first graph. This shows the actual value of the resources we provide to the Senate versus what we receive in return. They told us these were standard partnership terms. They lied. We've been trading advanced technology and rare minerals for basic goods at rates that favor them by a factor of 3 to 1. 3 to 1? Councillor Mireille repeated. That's not trade, that's theft. It gets worse, Hyunwoo continued. He brought up another chart. These are patents and technology licenses. Do you remember the gravity drive we shared with the Senate? 5 years ago. The one we developed to help everyone travel faster? The Vethrak have rebranded it as their own invention. They're charging other species licensing fees for our technology. The room erupted in angry voices. President Jiwoo raised her hand for silence. Is there more? Dr. Minho, Earth's chief scientist, stood next. He was younger than most of the council, but his intelligence had earned him his position. Yes, President, much more. My team has been analyzing Senate data networks, with permission, of course, he added quickly. We found evidence that at least 6 species have been reverse engineering our technology and claiming it as their own innovations. He pulled up a list of inventions: medical scanners, agricultural drones, water purification systems, energy grid stabilizers, all human designs, all now credited to other species. They didn't just dismiss our ideas, Minho said. They stole them and made us look foolish for even suggesting we had anything valuable to offer. The silence that followed was heavy. President Jiwoo looked around the table at the faces of humanity's leaders. She saw anger, yes, but also hurt. They had come to the galaxy with open hands and honest hearts. They had believed in cooperation and mutual respect. And they had been treated like children playing at a game they couldn't understand. How many proposals have we submitted to the Senate? She asked. 7 major ones, Admiral Taeyang answered. All rejected without real consideration, plus dozens of minor suggestions that were ignored completely. And how many times have they come to us for help? 43 times in the last 2 years alone, Trade Minister Hyunwoo said. Usually for technical problems they can't solve themselves. We always helped. President Jiwoo stood. She walked to the window that looked out at Earth below, the blue and green world that humanity called home. We have a choice to make, she said. We can stay in the Senate and continue to be treated this way. We can fight for respect through official channels that clearly don't work. Or we can do something else. What are you thinking? Admiral Taeyang asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. I'm thinking that we gave them a chance, 50 years of chances, and they've shown us exactly what they think of us. She turned back to face the council. I'm thinking it's time we showed them what we think of membership in a club that doesn't want us as equals. Dr. Minho leaned forward. Are you suggesting we leave the Senate? I'm suggesting we leave everything, Jiwoo said. Every Senate world, every joint project, every shared space station. We pull back to our own territory, and we close the door behind us. That would be a massive undertaking, Counselor Mirai said. We have colonies on mixed worlds, scientists in joint research facilities, trade agreements that would need to be terminated. It would take months, maybe years. Then we'd better start now, Jiwoo replied. She looked at Ambassador Dae-hyun, who had been silent throughout the meeting. I want you to deliver one final message to the Senate. Make it official. Make it clear. They can treat us as equals, or they can do without us entirely. Give them the choice. They won't choose equality, Dae-hyun said. They'll laugh again, they'll think we're bluffing. I know, President Jiwoo said, but we follow protocol. We give them the chance. And when they dismiss us one more time, we leave with a clear conscience. The council voted. The decision was unanimous. Humanity would issue one final warning to the Galactic Senate. 3 days later, Ambassador Dae-hyun stood before the Senate once more. This time, he didn't bring proposals or charts. He brought a simple message written on official Human Council letterhead. The United Worlds of Humanity formally requests equal treatment within this body, he read. If the Senate cannot provide this basic courtesy, humanity will reconsider its membership. The laughter was even louder this time. Thalos didn't even bother to stand. Is this a threat, Ambassador? How charming. Perhaps in a few decades, when you've matured as a species, we can discuss this again. Until then, try not to throw tantrums when the adults are working. Dae-hyun carefully folded the letter and placed it on the Senate record stand. The warning has been delivered. What you do with it is your choice. As he left the chamber, he activated his communicator. The message to Earth was even shorter than before. Begin evacuation. The first sign was small. A human trade ship scheduled to deliver medical supplies to the Quillix homeworld simply didn't arrive. The Quillix officials assumed it was delayed. They sent messages asking about the new arrival time. The messages went unanswered. Then another ship failed to appear. And another. Within a week, every human trading vessel had vanished from the scheduled routes. The ports that had grown accustomed to seeing human merchants found their docking bays empty. The goods that dozens of species had come to rely on stopped flowing. On the mixed colony world of Tanger 7, the human settlers began packing. They worked through the night, loading their belongings onto transport ships. Their alien neighbors watched in confusion. When asked what was happening, the humans simply said they were going home. By morning, the entire human quarter was empty. Houses that had been full of life stood silent. Schools where human children had played sat abandoned. At the joint research facility on Kepler Station, Dr. Yoonji shut down her lab. She had been working there for 5 years, collaborating with Vethrak scientists on quantum mechanics. Her work was important, groundbreaking even. But when the message came from Earth, she didn't hesitate. She saved her personal research, locked the lab, and took only what belonged to her. The equipment humanity had provided stayed behind, but without her knowledge to operate it, the machines were just expensive decorations. The pattern repeated across the galaxy. Human embassies closed their doors. Diplomats packed their offices. Security personnel handed in their credentials. It happened so smoothly, so quietly, that at first the other species didn't realize the scale of what was occurring. There were no announcements, no dramatic statements. Humans simply stopped being where they had been. The Senate officials noticed something was wrong when they tried to contact Earth about a routine matter. The communication channels were still open, but instead of reaching a person, they got an automated message. The United Worlds of Humanity are currently engaged in internal restructuring. For all inquiries, please submit requests through formal channels. Response time may be delayed indefinitely. Delayed indefinitely. The word should have been a warning, but the Senate didn't understand. Not yet. On Dracon Prime, Senator Yelena tried to reach her human colleague, a scientist named Quan, who she had worked with for years. They weren't just professional associates. They were friends. She had been to his home for dinner. She had met his family. When his office stood empty and his messages went unanswered, she felt genuine worry. She went to the human residential sector in the capital city. It was a ghost town. Apartments were vacant. The community center was locked. Even the small garden that the human residents had maintained was already starting to look wild and untended. It had only been 3 weeks since the Senate meeting. How had they all left so quickly? Junior diplomat Soman was one of the last humans in Senate space. Her job was to ensure that every human citizen made it out safely, and that all official connections were properly severed. She moved through Senate territory like a ghost, checking lists and confirming evacuations. She was efficient and thorough, making sure nothing was forgotten. At the spaceport on Vethrak's moon, Sulak himself confronted her. The large reptilian blocked her path to the boarding ramp. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. "Where are your people going?" Soman looked up at him without fear. She was small compared to his massive frame, but her voice was steady. "Home, we're going home." "Why? Because of the Senate meeting? Because we didn't approve your little proposal?" Sulak's laugh was harsh. "You would abandon your responsibilities over something so trivial?" "Trivial," Soman repeated. She almost smiled. "You called us children. You laughed at us. You stole our technology and claimed it as your own. You made it very clear that you don't see us as equals. So we're leaving." "You can't just leave," another official sputtered. "You have agreements, contracts, obligations, all of which have been fulfilled or properly terminated," Somin said. She pulled out a datapad and showed them the documents. Everything was legal. Everything was in order. "We learned a lot from you during our time in the Senate. You taught us about contracts and obligations. You also taught us about knowing when we're not wanted." "This is ridiculous," Sulak said. "You're overreacting. Come back in a few months when you've calmed down." Soman shouldered her bag. "No, we won't be coming back. Not in a few months, not ever. You had 50 years to treat us with respect. You chose mockery instead. That's on you, not us." She walked past him onto the ship. As the boarding ramp raised, she turned back one last time. "You told us to be grateful for the opportunity to learn from our betters. We were grateful. We learned everything we needed to know. Now we're applying those lessons somewhere else. Goodbye, Counselor Sulak." The ship lifted off, and Soman watched the spaceport shrink below her. She felt no sadness, no regret. Only relief. They were finally free. Her ship passed through the outer markers of the Sol system 2 days later. She was looking at the sensor display when something incredible happened. The entire system lit up with energy readings. Massive field generators that had been built in secret activated all at once. They created a barrier around all of human space, stretching across dozens of star systems. Soman watched as every jump point leading to human territory simply closed. Every wormhole sealed. Every hyperspace lane that touched human space became impassable. It was as if someone had built a wall across a section of the galaxy, and humanity was on the other side. She received one final transmission from Earth before crossing through the barrier. It was from Admiral Taeyang himself. "Welcome home, Soman. You're the last one. Everyone's accounted for. We're closing the door now. Whatever happens next, we face it as ourselves, not as anyone's children." The barrier completed its formation. From the outside, human space became a blank spot on galactic maps. Sensors couldn't penetrate it. Communications couldn't cross it. Ships that tried to approach found their systems failing for no apparent reason. Humanity had left the galaxy. Not physically, but they might as well have. They were still there, still in their same systems and colonies, but they had made themselves unreachable. And they had done it so completely, so suddenly, that the rest of the galaxy was still trying to understand what had happened. For the first month after humanity's departure, the Galactic Senate was almost cheerful. Thalos made a speech about how the young species had finally learned their place. Sulak joked that perhaps humans needed a few centuries to develop thicker skin. The general consensus was that humanity would come crawling back once they realized how much they needed the galactic community. The second month, the jokes stopped. It started with the trade routes. The shipping lane between the Vethrak homeworld and the Quilix territories had always been efficient, moving goods in just 3 days. Suddenly, it took 10 days. Ships were forced to take longer paths, burning more fuel and time. Captains complained, but officials told them to adapt. They didn't understand why the route had changed until someone checked the old maps. The route had always passed through a human way station. The station was gone now, empty and dark. Ships could still use the space, but without the way station's guidance systems and refueling services, they had to take the long way around. It added a week to every journey. That was just one route. There were dozens of others, all suddenly less efficient. The galactic shipping network that had run so smoothly began to develop delays and bottlenecks. Companies complained about increased costs. Goods arrived late. The economy started to slow. Then the technology began failing. The Dracon Assembly had a fleet of fast courier ships that could cross their territory in hours. They were the pride of their civilization, using advanced gravity drives that made them the fastest vessels in the Senate. One by one, the ships started having problems. The drives still worked, but only at half speed. Engineers tore apart the systems trying to find the fault. Finally, a young Dracon mechanic named Rena figured it out. "These aren't our gravity drives," she reported to her superiors. "I mean, they are now, but the original design was human. We adapted it, but we never fully understood the modifications they made. Without their maintenance updates, the systems are degrading back to the basic version." "Can we fix it?" her supervisor asked. Rena shook her head. "Not without understanding what the humans did to improve them. And they never shared those details. We just used what they gave us and assumed it would work forever." The same problem appeared across the galaxy. Technologies that everyone thought were standard galactic equipment turned out to be human innovations that had been quietly integrated into daily life. Medical scanners, water purifiers, power grid stabilizers. All of them started showing problems without human maintenance. The medical crisis hit the Quilix swarm hardest. Their agricultural worlds had adopted advanced pollination drones 5 years earlier. The technology had doubled their crop yields. The drones were supposedly standard equipment that any species could maintain. That was wrong. When the drones started failing, Quilix engineers tried to repair them. The machines were incredibly complex, calibrated specifically for Quilix plant biology. Without the regular updates that humans had been quietly providing, the drones became confused. They pollinated the wrong plants at the wrong times. Entire fields of crops failed. "How did we not know these were human-designed?" the Quilix Queen demanded. Her chief scientist lowered his head. "They never made it obvious, Your Majesty. They just helped. When we had problems, human technicians would fix them. We thought they were just being helpful neighbors. We didn't realize they were fixing their own technology." The famine warnings came 2 months later. The Quilix had food reserves, but not enough. They would need to import grain from other worlds, at prices they could barely afford. All because drones they thought they understood had turned out to be beyond their ability to maintain. But the worst crisis was the power grid failures. They started small. A factory losing power for a few hours. A city experiencing rolling blackouts. Then entire planets went dark for days at a time. Senator Yelena was the first to publicly connect the dots. She stood before the Senate with data that made everyone uncomfortable. "I've been researching humanity's contributions to our civilization," she said. "Not the contributions they formally presented, but the work they did quietly, without asking for credit or recognition." She displayed a galactic map covered in red markers. Each marker represented a system where humans had worked. These are power grids that humans upgraded, communication networks they improved, environmental systems they repaired. In every case, they made things better and never asked for anything in return. We didn't even notice they were doing it. She changed the display to show current crisis points. The map was nearly identical. These are the systems failing now. Every single one was maintained by human engineers. They didn't just upgrade our technology. They became part of the infrastructure that keeps our worlds running, and we never even thanked them. The Senate chamber was silent. Thalos looked at the map with something like horror in his ancient eyes. "How much of our infrastructure did they maintain?" he asked quietly. 17%, Yelena replied. Nearly 1/5 of all critical systems across Senate space had human involvement. Life support systems, water treatment, medical facilities, food production, transportation networks. They were everywhere, fixing things, improving things, keeping things running, and we treated them like ignorant children. Councillor Borak of the Vethrak spoke up. "Surely we can manage without them. We are advanced civilizations. We built these systems in the first place." "Did we?" Yelena challenged. "Look at the power grid on Vethrak Prime. It's 3,000 years old. Do you know why it never fails? Because human engineers completely rebuilt the distribution network 5 years ago. They found cascade failure points that your people missed for centuries. They fixed them without mentioning it, because they thought they were being good community members. She pulled up another report. The environmental systems on Kepler Station, human designed. The medical facility on Tangor 7, human upgraded. The shipping coordination network we all use, human maintained. They didn't just contribute to our civilization. They became the glue holding parts of it together, and we never noticed because they didn't brag about it. Trade Minister Hyun-woo's last report to the Senate came up on the display, the one they had laughed at. Yelena read from it. We can improve galactic efficiency by 32%. Not because we're smarter, but because we've spent 50 years quietly learning your systems and finding ways to help. Let us share what we've learned. And we mocked them for it, Yelena finished. Her voice was sad. We told them to be grateful for the chance to learn from us. They were grateful. They learned everything. They learned how our systems worked, our technologies functioned, our societies operated. And while they learned, they fixed things. They made everything better. And we didn't even notice until they were gone. The Senate sat in stunned silence. The implications were crushing. Humanity hadn't needed the galactic community. The galactic community had needed humanity. And they had driven them away with contempt and mockery. Can we contact them? Someone asked. Apologize? Ask them to come back? Yelena shook her head. We've tried. Every message goes unanswered. Every ship we send to human space encounters some kind of barrier. They've closed their borders completely. And honestly, can you blame them? We had 50 years to treat them with respect. 50 years to see their value. We spent that time laughing at them instead. In his private chambers, Thelos reviewed the recordings of every Senate meeting where humans had presented proposals. 7 major proposals, dozens of suggestions, all of them good ideas. All of them dismissed without real consideration. And in every recording, he saw his own face, his own condescending smile, his own casual cruelty disguised as wisdom. He was 10,000 years old. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had guided the Senate through countless crises, and he had just made the biggest mistake of his impossibly long life. He had driven away the one species that had actually been trying to help. The Senate voted unanimously to send a diplomatic mission to Earth. It was a historic moment. 40 species who rarely agreed on anything had come together with one purpose: bring humanity back. They assembled a fleet of 20 ships, each carrying representatives and gifts, art, technology, precious resources, everything they could think of to show humanity that they were valued. The fleet was led by Senator Yelena herself. She had volunteered for the mission, feeling responsible somehow. She had been one of the few who felt uncomfortable during that Senate meeting, but she hadn't spoken up. Maybe if she had, things would be different. Now she had a chance to make it right. The journey to the Sol system took 3 weeks. The fleet traveled in formation, broadcasting messages of peace and apology on every frequency. They rehearsed speeches. They prepared elaborate presentations. They were confident that once humanity saw how much the Senate regretted their behavior, everything would be fixed. They reached the edge of human space on a Tuesday morning, Galactic Standard Time. The stars looked the same as they always had. Space seemed normal. But when they tried to proceed forward, everything changed. The lead ship's systems began to malfunction. Not from any weapon or attack, but as if the technology itself was forgetting how to work. Engines sputtered. Life support flickered. Navigation computers showed nothing but static. The captain ordered a retreat, and as soon as they backed away from the boundary, everything returned to normal. What just happened? Yelena demanded. The chief engineer studied his displays with confusion. I don't know, Senator. It was as if we entered a dead zone. A place where technology simply doesn't function, but that's impossible. Space doesn't work that way, unless someone makes it work that way, Yelena said quietly. She looked at the empty space ahead. Somewhere beyond that invisible barrier was Earth, humanity's homeworld, and they had made it completely unreachable. They tried everything. Different ships, different trajectories, different technologies. Nothing worked. Every vessel that approached the boundary experienced the same systematic failure. And it wasn't hostile. There were no weapons, no attacks, no violence. It was just nothing. A void where human technology had decided that other technology was no longer welcome. The fleet settled into orbit at a safe distance and began broadcasting messages. They used every communication method known to the galaxy: radio, laser transmission, quantum entanglement channels, gravitational wave modulation. The messages were simple: we were wrong. We're sorry. Please talk to us. Silence was their only answer. Days passed, then weeks. The diplomatic fleet remained at the boundary, broadcasting constantly. Other ships arrived carrying messages from homeworlds. Personal pleas from individuals who had human friends, business partners who wanted to apologize, scientists who missed their colleagues. None of it mattered. The barrier remained and no response came. Senator Yelena remembered her friend Quan. She recorded a personal message to him, bypassing official channels. Quan, it's me. I know you probably won't answer, but I need to say this anyway. You were right. About everything. The trade proposals. The technology sharing. The respect you asked for. We should have listened. I should have spoken up. I'm sorry I didn't. She sent the message and waited. Nothing came back. The Senate authorized more extreme measures. They located humans who had married into other species and stayed in galactic space when everyone else left. There were about 200 of them spread across Senate territory. Surely they could help establish contact. Captain Borum, a Vethrak military officer, knew one of these humans. Her name was Nari, and she had married a Vethrak engineer 15 years ago. They had 2 children together. She had chosen to stay with her family when the evacuation happened, formally renouncing her human citizenship. Borum had trained with human forces early in his career. He respected them. He had never mocked them. Surely Nari would help him. He found her at her home on Vethrak Prime. She invited him in politely but looked tired. I know why you're here, Captain, she said before he could explain. The answer is no. You haven't heard my question yet, Borum said. You want me to contact Earth, to use my personal connections to help the Senate reach humanity. The answer is no. Nari poured tea for both of them with steady hands. I gave up my citizenship. I chose this life. That means I respect the choice my people made. But surely you have some way to contact them. Family, friends, anyone. Nari shook her head. When I chose to stay, I understood what it meant. I was choosing my husband and children over my homeworld. That's fine. I love them. But I can't have it both ways. I can't keep one foot in human space while living here. It wouldn't be fair to anyone. The Senate wants to apologize, Borum said. They know they were wrong. Good. They should know that. Nari sipped her tea. But knowing you were wrong and being forgiven are 2 different things. The Senate had 50 years to treat humanity with respect. They chose mockery instead. My people gave them a warning, and they laughed at that too. What exactly do you expect now? Borum leaned forward. I never mocked them. I respected your people. I still do. Doesn't that count for something? For the first time, Nari's expression softened. It does, Captain. To me personally, it means a lot. But I'm not humanity. I'm just one person who chose a different path. The 200 of us who stayed were not ambassadors. We're just people who made personal choices. We don't speak for Earth, and Earth doesn't speak for us anymore. Borum tried one more approach. He pulled out an old access code, something from his training days with human forces. It was a friendship code, supposed to work as an emergency contact. I'm going to try anyway, he said. I have to at least try. Nari didn't stop him. She just looked sad. Borum took his personal ship to the barrier. He went alone, broadcasting the old friendship code. To his surprise, he made it slightly farther than the diplomatic fleet had. His systems held together longer. Maybe the code was working. Maybe someone remembered him. Then his engines died. Life support failed. His ship went dark, floating dead in space. Borum prepared to activate his emergency beacon, wondering if he would survive this. Then his communication console lit up with a single text transmission. The friendship was real, Borum. You were always respectful. You never mocked us. But this isn't about individuals. This is about being treated like equals by the civilization we tried to join. Go home, Captain. Take care of yourself. But don't come back here. We're done with the Senate. The message ended. Borum's systems came back online as if nothing had happened. He had power, life support, everything. They had turned off his ship to make a point, then turned it back on because they didn't want to hurt him. It was almost kind. Almost. He returned to the fleet and reported his failure. Yelena listened to his recording of the message and her shoulders slumped. "They're really not coming back," she said. "No," Borum agreed. "They're not." Back at the Senate, the crisis deepened. The Quillix famine was getting worse. Power grids continued to fail. Trade routes remained inefficient. And humanity remained silent behind their impenetrable barrier, unreachable and unforgiving. Thalos called an emergency session. He stood before the Senate looking older than his thousands of years. "I believe we must accept a difficult truth," he said. "Humanity is not going to forgive us. They are not going to come back. We must learn to function without them, no matter how hard that becomes." Then he did something unprecedented. He resigned from his position as council chair. "I led this body for 3,000 years," he said. "In that time, I made many good decisions, but I also made the worst mistake of my life. I treated our youngest members with contempt. I valued age over contribution. I chose pride over wisdom. I don't deserve to lead anymore." The Senate sat in shocked silence as the ancient leader walked out of the chamber for the last time. 1 year after humanity's departure, the Galactic Senate met in emergency session for the 9th time that month. The grand chamber that had once symbolized unity and cooperation now felt more like a war room. Species argued with each other. Accusations flew. The careful diplomacy that had held the Senate together for millennia was breaking down under the weight of cascading crises. Senator Yelena, now acting as temporary council chair after Thalos's resignation, tried to maintain order. It was almost impossible. 3 major trade alliances had collapsed in the past 6 months. 12 systems were experiencing civil unrest due to economic problems. The Quillix swarm was on the edge of internal war, as their food shortage created desperate competition between hive clusters. "We must consider more aggressive options," Councillor Sulak announced. He had grown thinner over the past year, the stress showing even in his reptilian features. "If humanity will not respond to diplomacy, perhaps they will respond to military pressure." The chamber erupted in shouting. Half the delegates supported the idea. The other half thought it was insane. "And what exactly would you do?" Admiral Castor of the Draken Fleet demanded. "We can't even reach human space. Our ships die before they get close. How do you propose to apply military pressure against an enemy we can't touch?" "We could threaten their former colonies," Sulak suggested. "The worlds they abandoned when they left. Make it clear that if they don't cooperate, those worlds are empty," Yelena interrupted. "Humanity took everything and everyone when they left. There's nothing there to threaten except empty buildings. And even if there were, do we really want to be the civilization that responds to rejection with violence? Haven't we embarrassed ourselves enough?" Sulak sat down defeated. He knew she was right, but desperation made people suggest desperate things. Dr. Rena from the Dracon Assembly presented her latest findings. The young engineer had become an expert on humanity's technological contributions, spending the past year trying to understand what they had left behind. Her report was grim. "I've analyzed the human modifications to our gravity drives," she said. "The technology they used is at least 50 years ahead of our own. Maybe more. They gave us simplified versions that worked well enough, but their own ships? They don't use gravity drives anymore. They've moved on to something called fold space compression." She displayed calculations that made the other scientists in the room go pale. "Based on the energy signatures we detected when they sealed their borders, this fold space technology is exponentially more advanced. If gravity drives let us cross the galaxy in weeks, their new drives could do it in days. Maybe hours. We don't really know because the mathematics barely make sense to us." "So they didn't just leave us," Councillor Mirai said slowly. "They left us behind. Technologically, they were always ahead and we never knew it." "Worse than that," Dr. Rena continued. "I've reviewed all the technology humanity shared with us over their 50 years in the Senate. Every single innovation was deliberately limited. They gave us version 1 while they quietly developed versions 2, 3, 4, and beyond. They shared enough to help us, but never enough to put us on equal footing with them." "Why would they do that?" someone asked. "Because they learned not to trust us," Yelena said quietly. "They offered full partnership and got mockery. So they held back their best work. Can you blame them?" The Senate received another shock when explorers returned from the former human colony of New Pyongyang. The world had been abandoned for over a year, but the buildings remained intact. The exploration team had hoped to find technology or data that might help them understand humanity better. Instead, they found a message. It was recorded by the colony's last governor, a woman named Hiran. The message was set to play in the Civic Center for anyone who entered. The explorers brought it back to the Senate, and Yelena played it for the entire chamber. Governor Hiran appeared on the screen, standing in an empty office with packed boxes visible behind her. She looked tired but determined. "To whoever comes after us," she began, "we came to the galaxy with hope. We believed in cooperation. We believed in a community of equals. We offered friendship, shared our knowledge, and tried to contribute to something bigger than ourselves." She paused, and her expression hardened. "You taught us that idealism has no place among the stars. You showed us that offering help makes you a target for exploitation, not a partner. You demonstrated that being young and enthusiastic is something to mock, not encourage. Thank you for the lesson. We won't make that mistake again." Governor Hiran looked directly at the camera. "Don't look for us. Don't follow us. Don't send more apologies or gifts or diplomatic missions. We're done with the Senate. We're done with species who value age over contribution and pride over cooperation. We're building our own future now, with people who actually want us as partners, not as servants or children or sources of free technology." She picked up a box and turned to leave, then paused at the door. "One more thing. Everything we built here, we built honestly. Everything we shared freely. You never had to steal our technology or take credit for our innovations. If you had just asked with respect, we would have helped. But you didn't respect us. So now you can figure it all out yourselves. Good luck. You're going to need it." The recording ended. The Senate chamber was completely silent. "Play it again," Sulak said, his voice barely a whisper. "Why?" Yelena asked. "Will it change anything?" "No, but I need to hear it. I need to remember what we did." The recording played twice more. Each time, more delegates looked away in shame. This wasn't an angry rant or an emotional outburst. It was a calm, measured statement of fact. Humanity had tried. The Senate had failed them. And now everyone was paying the price. The economic data continued to worsen. Without human technology and maintenance, systems across the galaxy operated at reduced efficiency. Medical advances had slowed to a crawl without human researchers. Agricultural output was down. Energy costs were up. The standard of living across Senate space had declined measurably in just 1 year. But worse than the economic problems were the discoveries about humanity's capabilities. Scout ships reported finding terraformed worlds far beyond known space, worlds that bore signs of human habitation but had been abandoned long ago. These weren't recent colonies. They were decades old, maybe longer. Humanity was exploring and colonizing far beyond Senate space the entire time they were members, Admiral Castor reported. "They never told us. They never asked permission. They just quietly expanded in directions we weren't even looking." "How many colonies?" Yelena asked. "We found evidence of at least 30 so far. All abandoned now. They must have consolidated their population when they withdrew. But the infrastructure remains. These weren't small outposts. These were full cities capable of supporting millions. They had an entire civilization we never knew about. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't been a small young species trying to fit into galactic society. They had been a growing power that chose to participate in the Senate, while simultaneously building their own empire elsewhere. And the Senate had been so busy mocking them that they never noticed. Trade Minister Hyunwoo's economic proposals were reviewed again, this time with actual attention. The senators who had laughed at them now studied them carefully. The proposals were brilliant. Every suggestion would have improved galactic trade and economic efficiency. The mathematics was flawless. The logic was sound. "We had the solutions to our current problems a year ago," Counselor Mirai said, holding up a copy of the human proposals. "They handed us everything we needed to avoid this crisis, and we threw it away, because we thought we knew better." Young Senator Kyung-min from the Draken Assembly stood to speak. She had only been elected after humanity's departure, so she bore no responsibility for what had happened. That gave her a different perspective. "With respect to this council," she said, "I think we're still missing the point. We keep talking about what humanity took from us, their technology, their maintenance, their economic contributions, but we're not talking about what we took from them." "What do you mean?" Yelena asked. "Dignity," Kyung-min said simply. respect. The basic courtesy of being heard. They didn't leave because we needed their technology and didn't appreciate it. They left because we needed them as people and didn't see it. Every human who contributed to our civilization was a person, someone with ideas and feelings and pride, and we treated them all like children playing at a game they couldn't understand. She looked around the chamber. Governor Hiron's message says it all. They came with hope and we gave them contempt. That's not an economic problem or a technology problem. That's a moral failure. And until we acknowledge that, we don't deserve to have them back. The session ended with no solutions and no real hope. The Senate had to accept reality. Humanity was gone, probably forever, and the galaxy they left behind was worse for their absence. 5 years after humanity's departure, the Galactic Senate had stabilized into a new normal. It wasn't the prosperity they had enjoyed before. It wasn't even close, but it was stable. Species had learned to work with what they had. Engineers figured out how to maintain old systems without human help. Trade routes operated at lower efficiency, but they operated. The galaxy survived, but it had changed fundamentally. The arrogance that once defined Senate culture was gone, replaced by a cautious humility. New proposals were actually considered now, regardless of which species presented them. The younger civilizations found their voices heard in ways they never had been before. Humanity's absence had taught the Senate a lesson about respect, though the cost of that education had been steep. Young Senator Kyungmin had become something of a historian. She spent years researching humanity's time in the Senate, compiling a comprehensive report that she titled simply, The Human Question. It became required reading in every diplomatic school across Senate space. Her conclusion was direct and undeniable. The galactic community had needed humanity far more than humanity had ever needed them. The report detailed everything. The technology humans had contributed, the systems they had maintained, the problems they had solved without asking for recognition. But more than that, it examined the cultural impact humanity had made. The idealism they brought, the questions they asked, the assumptions they challenged. Humanity forced us to justify ourselves, Kyungmin wrote. When they asked why we did things certain ways, we couldn't just say, because we always have. They made us think. They made us better, even when we resented them for it. Their greatest contribution wasn't their technology. It was their refusal to accept that age equals wisdom and tradition equals correctness. The report was controversial but respected. Some older senators felt it was too harsh on their generation, but most accepted it as truth. They had failed humanity, and the galaxy was still paying for that failure. Rumors about humanity continued to circulate. A merchant ship captain swore she saw a human vessel at the edge of unexplored space, moving at speeds that should have been impossible. By the time she got close enough to confirm, it was gone. Another explorer found a planet that had been fully terraformed within the last 10 years. The technology used was beyond anything the Senate could achieve. No species claimed responsibility, but the work had human fingerprints all over it. The most persistent rumor involved first contact. Explorers working at the far edges of known space reported finding new species, civilizations that had never heard of the Galactic Senate. Some of these species mentioned trading with a group they called the Travelers, or the Bridge Builders. The descriptions matched humans. It seemed humanity had moved beyond Senate space entirely and was making friends in territories the Senate had never even explored. They're still out there, Admiral Castor said during a security briefing. Still expanding, still innovating, but they're doing it far away from us with species who have no connection to their past here. They're building a new network, a new community, one where they're founding members instead of late arrivals. Should we try to make contact through these new species? Someone suggested. No, Yelena said firmly. She had remained as council chair, earning the position legitimately after Thalos's resignation. If humanity wants to build relationships elsewhere, that's their right. We don't get to insert ourselves into their new life just because we regret how we treated them in their old one. The Senate established a secret protocol in the highest levels of government. It was sealed in secure archives known only to senior leadership. The protocol was simple. If humanity ever made direct contact again, the Senate would immediately grant them full senior member status with veto power. They would receive formal apologies. They would be offered reparations. Every demand they made would be given serious consideration. The protocol sat waiting, untouched. Most senators doubted it would ever be needed. Humanity had moved on. On Earth, life had transformed in ways the Senate could never have imagined. President Ji-woo had served 2 terms and retired, replaced by younger leaders who had never known galactic politics. The crisis of leaving the Senate had become history, something studied in schools but not experienced. Humanity had indeed found new allies, species far from Senate space who treated them as equals from the first meeting. Trade partnerships based on mutual respect. Scientific collaboration where credit was shared fairly. Military alliances where humanity's contributions were valued, not dismissed. The barrier around human space remained, but it was no longer needed for protection. It was maintained as a symbol, a reminder to humanity itself of what they had walked away from and why. Children learned about the Senate in history class, about the 50 years humanity spent trying to fit into a community that didn't want them as equals. Dr. Minho, now elderly, but still brilliant, had developed the fold space compression technology that the Senate had barely understood. Human ships could cross vast distances in hours. Exploration had accelerated dramatically. Colonies spread across previously unreachable regions of space. Humanity was no longer a young species taking its first steps into the galaxy. They were a major power in their own right. Ambassador Dae-hyun had retired from public service but occasionally lectured at the Diplomatic Academy. His class was always full. Students wanted to hear first-hand accounts of humanity's time in the Senate. He was honest about it, neither bitter nor nostalgic. "We tried," he would tell his students. "We offered genuine friendship and partnership. When that was rejected, we had a choice. We could stay and accept being treated as lesser, or we could leave and build something better. We chose our dignity over their approval. That choice made us who we are today." "Do you regret leaving?" a student once asked. Dae-hyun thought about it carefully. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that diplomacy failed. But I don't regret the decision itself. Leaving the Senate was the best thing humanity ever did. It forced us to rely on ourselves. It made us find partners who actually wanted us as partners. It taught us that being respected is more important than being included." He looked at the young faces before him. "Never let anyone make you smaller than you are. Not in the Senate, not anywhere in the universe. We don't need validation from those who refuse to see us clearly. We just need to see ourselves clearly. Remember that, and you'll do fine." Occasionally, very occasionally, someone in Senate space would pick up a transmission from human space. It was never directed at them. It was just background chatter, communications between human ships or colonies that happened to bounce through space in a way that bypassed the barrier. The transmissions revealed bits of information about humanity's progress. New technologies, new discoveries, new alliances. The Senate monitored these transmissions carefully, analyzing every piece of data, not because they hoped to steal technology anymore, but because they wanted to understand what they had lost. With each new discovery, the answer became clearer. They had lost a species that could have made them better. They had lost partners who would have helped them grow. They had lost friends who came with open hands and honest hearts. In the Senate chamber, now more humble and less grand than it once was, a memorial had been erected. It wasn't approved by any vote or official decree. Senator Yelena simply commissioned it one day and had it placed near the main entrance. It was a simple plaque with a simple message. Here stood humanity for 50 years. They offered us partnership. They showed us innovation. They taught us lessons we were too arrogant to learn. They left because we failed to see their value. May we never make that mistake again with any species, young or old. Not all senators liked the memorial. Some thought it was too harsh, too critical of their civilization, but no one ordered it removed. It stayed there, a permanent reminder of the cost of arrogance. Far beyond Senate space, beyond the barrier and the buffer zones and the territories claimed by any known power, humanity continued forward. They built cities on new worlds. They made friends with new species. They developed technology that would have seemed like magic to their former colleagues. And they did it all without looking back. On a colony world named New Hope, children played in parks designed by architects who had never seen Earth but carried its legacy forward. Their parents worked alongside alien partners from a dozen species, all treating each other with mutual respect. Trade ships came and went, carrying goods and ideas and culture between worlds. Scientists from different species collaborated on projects that pushed the boundaries of knowledge. It was everything humanity had hoped the Galactic Senate would be. Admiral Taeyang, now retired but still sharp, sat on a bench in one of those parks, watching the children play. Some were human, some weren't. All of them were growing up in a society where respect was the foundation of every interaction. They would never know what it was like to be dismissed because of their age or mocked for their idealism. That was good. A young officer approached and saluted. "Admiral, we've detected another Senate probe at the edge of our space. Should we respond?" Taeyang thought about it. 5 years ago, he would have said no immediately, but time had softened some of the anger. Send them a brief message. Nothing detailed. Just let them know we're doing well.